Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, Who is Harrison Sawyer, Heart Song, a few books. So, and Pops.
And what he's not telling you is he's extremely weary because he is a jet setter.
Mm-hmm.
Just back from over the pond.
Mm-hmm.
You were in Spain?
Yes, I was in Spain. I was in Madrid. Also took a quick little detour up to Toledo, which was amazing. Holy Toledo. And I'm going to try and function tonight, guys. I'm doing my best here. So.
It's like 2:30 over there, so, and he just got back after 21 hours of travel. But tell me, I've always wondered, is it true that the rain in Spain is mainly on the plane?
Yeah, well, it falls mainly on the plains, is what they say.
Okay. All right. I'm Alton Gansky. In addition to being the life of the party, I'm the author of about 50 books, a writing teacher, do some editing, and incorrigible typewriter addict.
I actually saw one in Spain, and I tried to send you a picture. It didn't go through, so I'll try again tonight, Pops.
Okay.
But there was no way I was getting that back on the plane. I didn't have enough room in my luggage.
That's what I thought you were going to say at first, that you tried to bring it back for him.
I would have, but I did not have an opportunity. So sadly.
You should have tried. You should have just left some clothes there. You can always buy more clothes and just taken the typewriter.
That is true.
You know?
That is true. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like he hasn't seen you naked. You were his kid, and I'm sure he changed diapers and stuff. So,
all right, I'm putting an end to this conversation right now. Molly, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Molly. I am the producer of the podcast. I'm pretty sure I'm about to lose my job. I'm the curator of the Unemployment Cookbook and author of the soon-to-be published, hopefully published, mystery location novel NOLA.
Wow, I'm glad I'm not the only one that's just kind of
brain dead
right now. Yeah, Molly.
I'm medicated. I've had the flu for a week, and then I've had a follow-up cold for the week after. So I'm a little bit medicated right now, and I apologize.
You just rolled in from work too, so
yeah, that too.
Pops is on his A game, which is going to have to be good enough for tonight. So, but we are.
I haven't been on my A game for 10 years, so.
All right, so this was. How are we encouraging our fans to stay and listen to this? We're just spent the first 5 minutes talking about how terrible it's going to be. All right,
so
it's going to be great.
Forgive us and stick around and see how much improvement we can go from here. Right.
Yes. Looking just for a little bit of grace and mercy. The information, this should be noted, the show notes were put together long before well, maybe not long before, but before I went to Madrid. So I was coherent when I did the show notes. So hopefully the information will still be solid if I can read straight. That's going to be the real challenge for tonight. But let's go ahead and jump in. Novel Spotlight. Today, this was my week, and I chose The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, one of my favorite all-time novels. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read Tim O'Brien or not, but he's fantastic. He's phenomenal. This is widely considered his greatest work, though his books win awards left and right. He could sneeze and the tissue would win some sort of award, I'm sure. But this is his opus, if you will. I first read it at Antioch, and I completely fell in love with it. It's a collection of short stories. Some argue that it's a novel because there's a certain consistency of characters from one story to the next. So even though the story threads don't continue chronologically throughout, you see certain events. He keeps kind of coming back and revisiting them and telling them a little bit differently, and there's slight variations. But what really fascinates me about this book is what he has to say about truth and the role that truth plays in fiction, and how sometimes fiction can actually be more true than nonfiction. And it's kind of hard to explain in any short amount of time, but if you read the book, it'll start to make sense to you. It is a war novel. It's about the Vietnam War, so it does have a lot of language in it and some violence, so some content warning there. But if you can handle that, it's a book that I think you'll be better off reading. Really, really good stuff there. So that's our Novel Spotlight. You guys ready to jump into our main topic?
Yes,
I am. But let me ask you this: is the my image flipped over?
No.
I mean, when each of you speak, I'm seeing you?
No. I'm talking about. Okay, look behind me.
I can read it perfectly.
Okay, it's flipped on my side. We don't have our toolbox anymore from Google, so I wasn't able to flip it or get the lower thirds. So
yeah, Hangouts is having a little bit of trouble, or at least the toolbox that we use for our lower thirds. So we apologize for that. But if you're looking for us online, I'll give you the links at the end of the show for that.
And by lower thirds, let's just be clear, we mean the little label where it says our name and our web address, not the lower thirds of like our feet and our knees or anything like that.
True. That is true. I do still have my lower third. From the knees down.
I've got all my knees, my feet, my ankles. I'm good to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. We get one punch drunk person and another it's all hopped up on cold medication. So
we're collectively we're missing our upper third. All right, here we go. First in fiction, encouragement from discouragement. This is a quick little thing of what you want to do when you want to quit. And so yeah, you're going to want to quit. If you're human and you write, the chances are you're going to want to quit, unless you're delusional. And even then, you'll probably still want to quit. I think all of us, any professional at some point contemplates quitting. It gets to be tough. Writing is like any other profession. It's maybe the best thing in the world, but there are times where it's just not enjoyable and it's a lot of hard work. And so it can be discouraging, and there will be a time where you will want to quit. So here's what we can do to avoid that. One of the first things that you want to do is you want to ignore that voice in your head that says that you're no good and that you're never going to make it. Experienced writers get this as well. I may mention this a little bit later, but Pops, before you jump in and say your thing here, I wanted to mention Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. I think I mentioned it later in the show notes. Very encouraging book. And she has, I think, an entire chapter devoted to this particular topic. And it's one of those books that's not just how to write fiction. It's how to be a writer, how to live the writer life, how to deal with the emotions that you're going to face as a writer. And so that's a really good book to have on your bookshelf, especially if you find at times that you want to quit, you want to give up, you don't think you're good enough. It's a book that you want to pick up and kind of skim back through and highlight and encourage yourself with that. So that's that's another free recommendation for this week. Annie Lamott's Bird by Bird.
A much beloved book. In fact, probably every professional writer has read it at least once. I didn't like it as much as most people do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a bad book. It's just I didn't resonate with her. But a lot of writers do, and it's very well worth getting and reading. And you're right, Aaron. Writers want to quit all the time, but I think that's true across professions. It wasn't that long ago. I was at the doctor's office for just an annual checkup, semi-annual checkup, and we were talking about how long you'd be a doctor and stuff. And I told him a very quick story, which I'll tell here. And that is many years ago, back in my pastor days, I was helping one of our members who had been in an accident, severely hurt, and a lawyer had to be brought in, and I helped him find a lawyer. And I tend to do this. I like to know why people do what they do. It's none of my business, but I always ask anyway. I said, well, you've been an attorney quite a while. If you had it all to do over again, would you do that? And he goes, oh, no. I'd be a doctor. I wouldn't have gone into law. So I was at my doctor's and I said, now you've been doing this for quite a while. If you had to do all over again, would you do it? And he goes, oh, no. I'd be a lawyer. So it's not unusual. We always think the grass is greener on the other side. Or as the famed theologian Irma Bombeck said, the grass is always greener over the septic tank. One of the things I understand about this feeling of wanting to quit is humans are emotional creatures, but I believe writers are even more emotional, especially fiction writers, because we are constantly living in some character's head, usually multiple characters, and conjuring up all those emotions that they feel. And so we tend to be not overly emotional, but we tend to be more in tune with emotions and more empathetic. So when things turn against us, because the writing profession is a tough one, and it can be discouraging. With it, we tend to react emotionally, and sometimes we just want to quit. Many times I've wanted to quit, but that's been true for other professions I've been in. I can't think of anything I've enjoyed more than being a writer, but there are times when I question whether or not I can stay in it, or if I ever should have gone in it or gone the direction I did. Doesn't really matter. I did, and I'm 50 books down the line these days. So you have to stick with it, and maybe later, if you want, I'll tell you the time I did quit. I think Aaron's going to say something that'll probably bring it up, but there's just needs to be an understanding that there are times when you want to quit, and sometimes you need to quit for a little bit, but that doesn't mean you can quit forever, or should. Sometimes you just have to readjust.
You bring up a good point, Pops, about writers living in the minds of their characters, and it's you hear a lot about actors who struggle. I'm thinking Heath Ledger here, but it's not uncommon to hear about actors who struggle with emotional issues, and a lot of them are kind of those method actors who really kind of put themselves into the role of the character, and some of these are very tormented characters. It can have a physical and emotional impact on you, that career. Writing, you do the same thing, but it's not just one character, it's several at a time. And so that can be, as you say, Pops, it does make you a little more empathetic, I believe. So
yeah, I was at a conference with a guy who's was an actor, mostly daytime stuff, well known, one of those good looking guys and stuff, and he hated it.
Really?
He wanted to be an actor, but he couldn't get the roles that he wanted. I mean, he'd get leading roles, but they were all in daytime soap operas or miniseries stuff like that. And he, in fact, I got one of my best pieces of advice about getting an agent from him. But I remember chatting with him for quite a while, and he just said, "No, I hate it. Sometimes I'd rather flip burgers than be an actor, just because it wasn't going the way he wanted it to go." And that happens in writing sometimes. You end up writing things that aren't your first love, but to keep things going. I've taken a call work for hire. Work for hire is where someone hires you to write a book. You usually don't get royalties. You just get a flat fee for it. And those are always difficult. But, I had a family to feed and stuff. So I would take those.
Yeah. And that can be, the business part of it, that can be a challenge as well. But I would think that that's probably one of the times that people think about quitting. But in terms of writing, I think that the prominent time that you feel like quitting is when you're getting rejection letters. And that usually happens up front in your writing career. Though I do want to make it clear that sometimes we as writers have this misconception that we'll get several rejection letters, but once we publish one book, then we stop getting rejection letters because now we've been published, and so we don't get rejection letters anymore. And I mean, Stephen King doesn't really get rejection letters. Well, he did. He from Chris Carter on X-Files, right, Pops? He wrote a screenplay or a teleplay for X-Files.
He was on the nighttime talk show. I don't remember which one, Jay Leno, something like that. I don't know, but he was in the green room. Those not familiar with the term, a green room is where guests wait for their turn to come on the show. And he's there with David Duchovny, Stephen King. And Stephen King said, "You'd be perfect to write for X-Files. I mean, that's that genre, that weirdness." And so Duchovny set it up. And Stephen King wrote one episode for X-Files. And Chris Carter, who was the chief writer and the producer, rejected it. You want to know why he rejected it?
Why?
It wasn't scary enough.
Huh.
Yeah. Who says that to Stephen King? He did. And but Stephen King just took it on the chin and rewrote it. He's a professional, sent it back. And then Chris Carter rewrote his, probably mostly because, it's a very formulaic thing in television. But nonetheless, yeah, it can happen no matter how well established you are.
Yeah. And so you do seem to get more rejection letters up front. That seems to be the process. And if you've been studying writing long, you know that everybody's been rejected at some point. You can just do a quick search for famous authors who were rejected. I mean, it would be a lot harder to find any professional writer who hasn't been rejected. And maybe it's just maybe it was just a short story or a poem or, some other projects, a novella, but something has been rejected, even articles. And that's to be expected because you're not going to be an expert right out of the gate. So what you want to remember is that in order to be a professional, you probably need to start collecting these now. Several famous writers would collect them. You also have to understand that getting a rejection slip doesn't mean that you're a terrible writer. Rejection slips never say you're a terrible writer. I don't know, maybe the mean ones do. What rejection slips are really saying is this project isn't right for us. Now, there are a couple different types of rejection letters, as we'll talk about as we move on here, but just understand that there's a big difference between someone saying you're a terrible writer and someone saying the project isn't right for us. One of the reasons I got into publishing so many years ago, when I started the Citron Review, is I wanted to start sending out acceptance letters. And that's infinitely more satisfying from the perspective of an editor to send out an acceptance letter than it is to send out a rejection letter. I became, I don't want to say depressed or saddened or whatever the case may be, but I had to send out rejection letters as a publisher. I didn't like it. And so I tried to make them as encouraging as possible. But the fact of the matter is not every submission is right for every publication. And so I tried to make that point clear. Just understand a rejection letter does not mean that you're terrible. It means that your project is not a match for what they're trying to do. So you need to know that there are two different types. There are the bad rejection letters and the good rejection letters. The bad rejection letters are usually really short and impersonal. They feel like it's, kind of a form rejection. Like if they begin with "Dear Sir" or "Dear Madam," it's probably a bad sign. This means that it could mean a couple of things. It could mean that you submitted a horror novel to a romance publisher, and that they didn't read it, or it could mean that they just have reached the plateau of how many submissions they can read. But usually it means they didn't read very much of your work and they made a pretty quick judgment, which is not to say that that's irresponsible or bad on their part. Sometimes they just know this isn't for us, and so they don't necessarily spend any more time on it than they feel they need to. Usually they'll send very vague language like, "This doesn't seem to work with us. This doesn't fit into what we're doing. We don't have room in our publishing calendar for this," whatever the case may be. They don't recommend any sort of edits or anything like that. They don't say anything specific about your project, anything about your characters, anything about your plot or your craft. It's just a very quick and very impersonal kind of a response. Those are not the good ones. Don't be discouraged if you get them. Everybody does. I've gotten some of them. Pops, I'm sure you've gotten 2, maybe 3. But we all get them.
Actually, I did early on, and that's when I quit. And I let my stuff sit for 5 years. I lost 5 years of writing time because I didn't know what I was doing. And I let a rejection by a pay-to-read agent. I didn't even know what those were then. I mean, I was dumb as a brick. Most bricks were smarter than I was. So I decided I just quit and went on with my life. So, and that was a mistake. I think I wrote so many books in such a short period of time I was making up for that. So yeah, we all get them. And then, like I said, I've done lots of books, but recently there was a book I really wanted to write. My agent loved it. Nonfiction work. He pulled some of his regular people with a short query letter. 15 people, 15 publishers bid on it. Not one of them accepted it.
It happens like that. It's unavoidable. Those things just happen. I've gotten acceptances that have been followed by rejections, which is kind of weird. Like, "We love your work. We would like to publish it. Hey, guess what? We're not doing fiction anymore." That kind of stuff. It's kind of, and the other thing is, if you're getting those types of rejections, don't freak out. Sometimes the publisher just doesn't know what they're doing. And I know that sounds awful, but sometimes they're just overwhelmed. They have too many things to read through, and they're just trying to keep their neck above water, so to speak. And they're just drowning. So don't give in. Don't feel tempted to quit when you get those bad rejections. So those are the ones that tend to hurt the most. It's not a reflection of you. One way that you can interpret it is, okay, they've rejected my work, so now I need to get better. Okay. If you try out for a professional football team and you don't make it, do you give up, or do you keep working out and hope that you can make it on a different squad? You keep working out. That's what you do. So it's an indication that you may need to work to improve your craft. That's it. Good reviews, though, the difference between a bad review and a good review is a good review is a lot more personal, and it can be longer. Rejection. I'm sorry. I keep saying I have reviews in the show notes. Maybe I wasn't coherent when I wrote these. Good rejections are usually more personal. They often will say something specific about your work, not a lot, but they might say, we liked this part, or we liked that part, or we liked it, but we didn't like this part, whatever the case may be. We were concerned about this character, or however, how the plot develops over the course of chapters 4 through 18. I don't know, whatever it is. It may not be super specific, but you will know that they've at least read your book, or at least a portion of it, if nothing else. And that is a really good indication. That should be actually something that's very encouraging to you, because it means you're getting close. If they start saying things like, we're not really hooked on the prologue, or this character seemed a little flat or fat. If your character's fat, they don't like fat characters. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're trying to write a diet guide and it's got a fat character. Oh, moving on. Maybe they like the detail, but there was too little detail on the whole scale there. The really nice ones may actually suggest a way to improve your work. They may say, hey, we'd really like for you to develop A, B, and C, and we think this is going to be a solid book. Or they'll say, hey, we don't have room for this now in our winter catalog, but why don't you send it back to us next year? Or if you can make these changes, we'd love to see a resubmission. If they're encouraging you to resubmit to them, that's a very, very positive sign. Very positive sign. If they say, you know what, we love this, we think it's going to find a home somewhere, but we're just not the home for it, take that as a compliment. That's great. They believe in your project, and it's just not a perfect match. Sometimes you go on a date with somebody who's really, really awesome, but you're just not compatible. And that same thing can be said with publishers and novels. So try and think of it in that context.
Yeah, the only thing I would really add to that is, again, don't expect too many comments in a rejection letter. Acquisitions editors have so much to read. And, there's things you can do to try to keep them interested, but in your proposals and your sample chapters and the like, but they don't have time to analyze your work and tell you where you went wrong. Sometimes they will say, we really like the idea. We like where you're going. I think you're off to a good start. We need to see some changes. Don't let that discourage you. Michener, I have a book that has a lot of photographs in it of Michener's work, letters that were exchanged and stuff. And famous as he is, he got one from an editor that says, that went over his manuscript and says, the first line is, what we have here is a good start. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thinking, does she know who she's talking to? But he was a professional. He went through and worked on those things, and that's probably one reason he had so much success. So, it happens. It certainly happens that way. But don't expect a long list. They just don't. They really don't have time. And I get requests. People want me to read their manuscripts, and if I did that, if I started doing that, I would never get anything else done. I get that many requests, and I'm a slow reader. Or can you fix this problem for me? No, I can't. And it would be wrong for me to do so. You got to learn to fix your own problems in your writing. But now if you're, I'm editing or something, that's a different thing. I'm being hired to go through, find the fault, talk to the author. Sometimes I can fix it with a few lines. Otherwise, I send it back to them and say, you need to address this issue. And they do that.
So what do you do when the rejections start rolling in? I think the first.
I drowned my. Oh, that wasn't a real question. I absolutely drown my sorrows in chocolate and television, and I don't talk to anybody for about a week.
That is absolutely one way that you can handle it. Maybe not the best way, but it is one thing you can do.
I want to build on that for a second, because I don't want everyone to think that Molly's crazy for that comment.
You know, you and my day boss would get along so well.
Yeah, I impressed myself so much with that comment, I completely forgot. That's not unusual. I have no. Never mind.
It's pretty much been my life the last week. Call Molly crazy, and the rest of the world doesn't exist. Thanks, guys.
I've received. I usually open letters from publishers right away, but there have been times, for example, I've gotten stuff back from editors, and it's taken me days to a week to open it and address those issues. I'm kind of being transparent here with it, but I hate that stuff because it's a reminder that I'm not as perfect as I think I am. Not by a long shot. And so I appreciate a good edit, but it also means I've got to go through this thing. And I had an editor that could send 20 pages easy of notes on things that need to be addressed. So I would set it beside my keyboard and I'd keep working on what I was working on. And then finally, at some point, I would muster the courage, open it up and get started. And even then, I wouldn't read it in its entirety. I would read one item at a time.
Yeah.
But that's how I function. So it's not unusual if it bothers you when you get these things. That's it'd probably be wrong if you weren't bothered by it. It matters.
True. And it's very easy to get discouraged. And that's the natural human reaction. But this is encouragement from discouragement. So we're trying to kind of flip the script here a little bit.
Yes, but I still feel validated.
As well you should. But what we're really trying to do here is what I want to encourage you to do is celebrate. And I know it sounds weird to celebrate when you get a rejection, but listen, you are now no longer a would-be writer. You are no longer an aspiring writer. You are a writer. Once you collect a rejection slip, at least one, you're a writer. You're doing it. You've completed a work and you have submitted it. You've gone through that process. And just because somebody didn't take it on, the first go around, that never happens or rarely happens. That's fine. Just keep doing it. You got to keep going. Just keep swimming. There's so many people out there who write and don't submit. These are usually the people who also don't finish their projects. That's the real difference between somebody who wants to be a writer and somebody who is a writer. The real writers finish and they submit and they don't quit when the rejections come in. But you should also take a minute to just let it sink in. I remember getting my first rejection letter, and I was lucky enough that my first rejection letter was a nice rejection letter. It was one of the quasi-personal ones. And I got a letter from a publisher. I was really excited about that. This was a professional letter written to me, and that by extension kind of made me a professional as well. So that's cool. Now, if you start getting a bunch of bad rejection letters, okay, so you know where not to submit next time. Maybe your style is not conducive to these particular publishers. Or, okay, you need to develop your game a little bit, so you work a little bit harder. You've got to cultivate your relationship. You have a bad first date, that's fine. I had a blind date with an underwear model. True story. I did. And it was terrible. It was so awful. I expected to be the one getting dumped, and I was the one who was like, I don't think I can call you anymore. But sometimes relationships just don't work out. So wherever you are, the other thing that you can think of is I don't know how many rejection slips you have, but it's probably not the same amount that Stephen King has. And I'm relatively sure you don't have as many rejection slips as J.K. Rowling. The best writers, the biggest names, have countless rejection slips that they've collected. Maybe they don't keep them, maybe they've destroyed them, whatever the case may be, but they've received them for sure. So maybe you land your first book in fewer tries than Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. Good for you. That's awesome. If you get a really good rejection letter, man, frame that, put it on your refrigerator, do whatever you need to do. You might even send a thank you note to the publishers who are sending you those, quote unquote, good rejection letters. Say, thank you for your time. I understand that you're very busy, and it means a lot to me that you read my manuscript so carefully. I'll be sure to make the changes that you've requested. Doing that, you would be surprised what that means to an editor. Somebody who writes back to say thank you, not to complain, not to criticize and say you don't know, a bestseller when you see it. Don't be petty. Don't be petty. Instead, just keep that relationship positive. Then what happens is you've got an editor in your corner. Then the next time you submit, you say, dear so-and-so, whatever the editor's name is, you were kind enough to look at my previous manuscript, X, Y, or Z. Here's my new manuscript, A, B, and C. I believe this is a good fit for you because we discussed these issues of my previous novel. I think I've made some strides in that area, and this novel, I think, will show that. Something like that. Now that editor is getting a letter thinking, hey, this is a guy that I rejected, but I really liked his work, and so I'd love to be able to publish this guy or publish this girl. I remember sending rejection letters to I can't remember his name. It's going to drive me crazy. But he had submitted to the Citron Review. I don't know how many times. I probably rejected 6 or 7 or 8 of his stories. And every time I did, I said, I love this. I really do. But we just can't publish it because of whatever the reason was. It just wasn't quite a fit. And I told him at the end of every letter, please don't give up on us. I really want your name in our publication. And he did. He kept sending us stuff, and we finally found one that matched. And it was beautiful. It was really fulfilling and satisfying to sit on the editor side of the chair and to work with someone on and to see them develop their craft over the course of a few weeks, a few months, a couple of years, whatever the case may be. That can be very, very powerful. And so don't be discouraged. Instead, maybe send that thank you note, and that can kind of help reorient your emotions.
I'm thinking while you were talking there, I got one rejection, and I thought it was going to be an acceptance letter because it said, we loved your proposal. It's one of the best looking proposals we've ever seen, because I do my proposals a little different than others folks do. And it was beautiful and clear to follow. We don't want your book, though. Well, nice. Thank you. Yeah.
So they get your hopes up and go through all of that, and then thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. I feel like a woman, somebody says, oh, you're just absolutely beautiful. You're gorgeous, but I don't want to be seen in public with you. So you never know quite what you're going to get with that.
You guys with dissing the beautiful women, I don't know what's wrong with you.
If you have to ask, you don't know us. It's a genetic thing.
Don't want to know you.
It's a genetic thing. It's amazing the kinds of things you experience when you do get rejections. There's any number of them. In fact, I have a friend who got a rejection. She had written over 100 books, all published, traditional publishing, very well known, got a contract, provided the book, and the publisher she had gotten a contract with rejected the book, sent it back. Now, you want to know a rejection that stings? That's one that stings because you're already under contract. They'd read the proposal and stuff. And she had to go back and rewrite the book to make it work, which she did and got it done. But you don't know. Now, she's 100 books in, and then boom, there's that. So it can happen. It's just part of the nature of the business. It's it's very much like sports, and that's one of the things to think about in writing. Baseball is a metaphor for life. I think we all agree to that. And what Al's first axiom is, no one ever hit a home run from the dugout. But when you think about batting averages, if somebody's hitting 300 in professional ball, they're a pretty good player. But that means they failed 7 trips to the plate. They flied out, struck out, whatever it might be, but they did not get on base 70% of the time. Writing's very much that way. You may not get on base 70% of the time. You just keep going till you get that. In another odd little turn from my career, I've been trying to get in with a particular publisher that I wanted to publish with, and they just kept rejecting what I sent them. I don't know how many things I sent them. They kept doing what you were talking about, Aaron. Please send us more. We love your stuff. We're not going to accept it, but we love it. Maybe it was entertainment for them. I don't know. So oddly enough, I just never placed. So I gave up on them and went on and published with other people. And then I got a work for hire job, and put together by a book packager, which may be a new term for some of our people. That's someone who makes their living coming up with ideas for books, hiring a writer, putting it all together, making sure that it's edited, even formatted, ready for the printer, and then they sell it to a publisher. So this guy hired me to write a particular book. I did, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 books for this guy. And he sold it to the publisher I'd been trying to get into for years.
Oh.
Can you believe that?
A happy ending.
I don't know what to do with that information.
I'm not the one who submitted it. He did. And they published it and was on the shelves for a while. And yeah, it's crazy business.
Wow.
With all of that. So, well, anyway, back to you, Aaron.
Yeah, it is. It is a crazy business, and people are still trying to figure it out. And we've talked about that before, but I think rejections are the number one reason why writers want to quit. But I think number 2 on the list has got to be writer's block, especially if it's prolonged. Man, that can be depressing. If it stretches from a day to 2 days to 3 days to a week to 2 weeks, man, it's rough. And we've done entire podcasts on this particular issue on writer's block. But one of the traits of writer's block you'll notice is that the negative voices that you hear in your head that say that you're no good, they get a microphone or something. They're on the PA system, and they're loud in your head telling you that you're no good. The work becomes more difficult. It's not fun. Sometimes when you have writer's block, writing just isn't fun. And you start thinking, man, my life would be so much easier if I wasn't trying to write this stupid book. I could just get a normal job, or I could, just get a second job or whatever it is, or just not do it anymore and play video games all day. That's can be a challenge. You start to think that the entire project is a failure. Maybe you need to just give up on the book. But that seems to be overreacting, because usually it's just the scene or the scenes that you're on. It's usually not the entire project. We've talked several times about what to do when you have writer's block. And so I'm going to kind of go over this somewhat quickly. Pops, you have some things to say as well. But if you're interested in hearing a more detailed breakdown of some of this, make sure you check out aarongansky.com and just search there for writer's block. And we've got a couple of podcasts on it that give you more information. But usually there are 2 things to do when you have writer's block rather than giving up. And the first thing to do to keep you from giving up is to give up. Does that make sense? No?
Jet lag, maybe?
Yeah.
Are you meditating? You're sounding a lot like me.
I feel like it. No, you want to give up for one day. If you're going to give up, just do it for one day. Or maybe better yet, just give up for an hour or maybe 2. Go see a movie, get some dinner, go for a walk, take a shower, read a book, especially poetry, read some poetry. Okay. Make some tea, call up a friend, or be a good son and call your mother. She misses you, which reminds me, I need to call my mom. Then roll up your sleeves and get to work. You can even phone a friend, one who's going to encourage and reaffirm you. That's a really powerful thing when you're stuck and you want to give up. Call someone who says, don't give up, somebody who can walk you through it. I like to call my friend Steve. You guys know, if you've been watching for a while, he used to be the co-host when we first started way back in so many years ago. And we'll just go and we'll grab some coffee. We'll hang out at Target and walk around and just talk shop. And he helps me work through a lot of my writer's block. And that's really good. Having someone in your corner is very, very valuable. But if you're going to give up, don't do it for anything more than a day.
Yeah, I call it the walk away. And I think it's very useful. It's something that creative people do. Is if things aren't going well, maybe you need to change something, like get up, walk around, go to a movie. For a while, I used to do a lot of writing at Starbucks. For some reason, I was more productive at Starbucks. 5, 6 lattes. You get You get a lot of energy doing that. But for some reason, I was just better there than I was working at my office in my home. Haven't had to do that for a very long time. Get up and walk away with it. But I would also suggest something else. Just write anyway. If you write several pages of junk, that's okay. You're still writing. You've done something, and that sometimes will lead to the breakthrough. That'll get the water flowing again, the creative stream flowing again, because you're kind of kicking that thing down. Let's go back to the baseball thing. Remember, you're a pretty good batter if you get 3 hits out of 10, meaning you're out 70% of the time. Imagine if you were a writer doing that, that you had to write 10 pages to get 3 good pages. That would be about the same percentage. And I would tell you that it's worth it to do that. Now, I don't know anyone that's had to do that, but I've at times been writing along thinking this is the worst stuff I've ever written. But what I found out is when I come back to it days later, it's not that bad. It's something that's going on in my head at the moment that I'm writing it. So just keep writing. Well, it doesn't feel right. Well, sometimes feelings are the problem. It doesn't matter what you feel. It matters what you do. Just keep doing it. And so that's what I would suggest. Yeah, you can walk away for a bit, but you want to come back to it. Or the other way is to simply power through it.
And those are the 2 suggestions that we make on our previous cast. We just give a lot more details. So yeah, good suggestions. Just keep swimming, right? Just keep swimming. That is often enough just to get things going again, get those wheels turning again. Another time that you may want to give up or quit is when somebody else succeeds. So we are human.
Well, that would be rather petty and jealous of other people.
Yes, it would be. And I remember Annie Lamott talks about this in Bird by Bird, and I remember reading this thinking, this will never happen to me. No. If one of my friends got published before me, I would be so excited for them. And then somebody got published before me, and I was like, what? I was like, this can't be happening. Or even just going to the bookstore and picking up books and reading them and thinking, how did this get published? Somebody got paid money to write this book and nobody's taking my project. It does seem very petty and annoying and childish. And it is. And we still have those emotions. It doesn't make it wrong to have those emotions. It just, we're human. And sometimes we think that we're better than other people. And how dare someone get a book contract before we do? And how dare someone publish this, terrible, awful novel when they're not, publishing yours? Guys, it's more, publishing is about more than just talent at times. Again, we keep talking about this relationship. It's just finding the right relationship, finding the right market, finding the right publisher. Somebody else getting published does not mean that you're a worse writer, even though that's what it seems like. It seems like somebody is saying, we like them more than we like you. It's like getting picked last for whatever team you're going to be on in PE. Not that that's ever happened to me every single time I've ever been in PE, but it's likely, this is just likely to happen. And so don't be discouraged by it. If your friend succeeds before you do, because we meet other writers, we hang out with other writers. If someone gets published before you, celebrate with them. Don't say anything to them about being bitter or how could you ever be published before me. None of that, right? Remember, they loved you enough to call you because they want to celebrate with you. So celebrate with them. Maybe later they'll pass your manuscript along to their publisher. Keep that relationship solid and enjoy it. You're getting closer, right? You can also take the opportunity to reevaluate your work. Maybe it's not as great as you think it is. Maybe you haven't been sending it to the right places. So do a little more research, polish it up a little bit, and try it again. It's not necessarily a race. And just because somebody gets published before you doesn't mean that it's a reflection on your talent. It's about right time, right place. The only thing that you can do is what you have control of, and that is to become a better writer and to continue to work and submit.
Yep. And that happens sometimes. We do get a little envious of other people who get published, especially if it's not good work. Bad stuff gets published, and sometimes it becomes bestsellers. Well, I'm not in charge of that. I didn't write it. I didn't accept it. I didn't publish it. It's just the way it is. Because publishing, in the end, all publishing is in the end a business, and they're out to make money. And so they have to do their best to pick projects that will do that. There are a few, for example, in the CBA, the Christian Booksellers Association, that will spend money on books they know aren't going to sell, but they think it has some social or some redeeming value that might be helpful. And they'll do that. Academic presses usually don't make a ton of money, but they're adding to the body of knowledge. So but really, when it comes down to it, success of others has nothing to do with me. I'm not in charge of that. I can't stop it. Don't want to stop it. If they make a lot of money for the publisher, it means the publisher is still going to be around. And when we focus on the distraction, all it does is tear apart our work. It weakens our work. It's easy to feel cheated, wronged, overlooked. It takes wisdom to stick to the work that's ahead of you. Now, again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying this is fun. You're not going to go, wee, someone got published before me, but I'm just happy as can be. If it stings, it stings, but it doesn't really matter. Your job is to do your work and do a good job with it. And that's not always easy. Not always easy to even hear, but that's the only thing that's going to make a difference is if you stick with it.
Indeed.
Okey-doke.
No one ever whined themselves into publication.
Are you sure? I'd be willing to try.
They've probably whined themselves out of publication, though.
I've seen that.
So, well, another time that you might be tempted to quit or to be discouraged is when you stop writing for any length of time, the longer time. So if you stop writing because you get busy for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a year, at that point, you start to reevaluate your dream. And sometimes that dream starts to slip away and you start asking yourself things like, do I really want to be a writer? If the answer is no, then you're done. I'm not sure why you're listening to this podcast. But if the answer is yes, then the thing to do is to keep going, to start writing again. Trying to tap into that personal motivation, listen to some of our previous casts about organizing your life so that you have time to write. But if you can quit, you probably should. And the way I say that, what I mean by that is I think the best writers are the ones who cannot quit. It's in them. It's in their blood. As long as it's in you and it's in your blood, then you should keep going because you owe it to yourself. Anyone else who's able to give up and doesn't have that nagging feeling in the back of their mind saying you should be writing, or better yet, that nagging feeling in the back of their heart saying you should be writing, well, then they're probably not a writer.
Very few people. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I had two trains of thought and they just collided.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So now I'm derailed here. No one... boy, I really did just derail with that.
You're supposed to be on your A game, Pops. You're supposed to be the anchor tonight. You're batting cleanup if we're using baseball metaphors.
So
I don't sleep well anymore, so this happens with that.
Thinking about that, one of my favorite quotes that I use as my writer life verse quote is by Isaac Asimov. He says, "I write for the same reason I breathe, because if I didn't, I would die." And that is exactly how I feel when I'm writing or not writing. So I need to get back into it.
Yeah, it really shows up, but you really miss it when you stop. Now, I've not been doing a lot of writing lately. I've been doing other things, but it's really eating at me. I'm really chomping at the bit now. But sometimes you do that to get that love back, to get that zeal back. So it's a stick-to-itiveness that really makes for a writer. You keep doing this. I have known people who write a book a year, every 2 years. I don't know how they do that. I'm afraid I would lose what skill I had. I always feel like I got to keep going before this stuff evaporates and I can't do it anymore. And the real key is to keep trying. I once had a little vision. I don't know if it was really a vision, but I imagined that I walked into a room where an elderly man was lying in bed, dying. He knew he was very close to death. And as I drew closer, I realized it was me. And I could tell that the me that was in the bed dying, the old man me, was trying to say something. And I lean over and I listen. And the old man me says, "I wish I had tried," then dies. And I never find out what I wished I had tried. And that's really what I was trying to get at earlier when I got derailed there. Very few people feel badly about having tried and failed. A great many feel badly for never having tried at all. And that is, I think, the real difference. You might try time and time again to get published and never get published. It's happened. All right. But at least you're up there at the plate taking your at-bats, which is more than most people who say they want to be writers ever do. When you send something in, it gets rejected, like Aaron said, you send it in. I mean, that is a victory alone, to have the tenacity to finish, to have the timidity to submit, and to then keep going if you get a rejection. That's more than most people who want to be writers ever do. And I meet a ton of people who will finish their work and never submit. Like you said, Aaron, we see that in writers' conferences. I forget what it is. It's something like 75% of the people, when asked to submit something, don't do it. The reason they give is they're afraid of rejection. Okay, get over yourself. You're going to get rejections. That's part of the game. Just like the baseball player is going to get out at the plate or fly out, it's just going to happen. But they're still going to get hits. So it's going to happen, but it's the only way they get the hits is they go back up to the plate.
So to use a football metaphor here, because that's what I watch, the hardest hit is always the first one you take in every game. But once you get hit for the first time in the game, your head gets back in the game and you remember what it is and you remember how to do your things and you're not nervous anymore. A lot of it's just nerves and anxiety. I think it's the same with writing. It's that first review, or that I'm looking at ahead of the show notes. It's that first rejection that you really, really dread. Once you get that, I'm not saying the others are going to be any easier, but it's like that first hit. It's jolting. But the next rejection won't jolt you as much. And then the next one won't jolt you as much. You'll understand what it means and the different types of rejections and how to deal with them. That's the hardest one to get. So once you get it, again, celebrate, throw yourself a little bit of a party and move on, and then start moving on toward the next submission, the next submission, and the next submission. Eventually you'll hit. You gotta, like you say, Pops, you gotta stick with it. You gotta be in it for the long haul. The next time that you may want to quit is when you start getting bad reviews. So let's say you've published your book and you make the great mistake of checking your reviews on Amazon, because we're all human and curious, and you see a negative review. These are as inevitable as rejections, because now if your book is published, it's not going out to one publisher, it's going out to hundreds, if not thousands of readers, 75% of whom all have a very strong opinion that they need to say, because everybody has to say something, right? And usually the loudest voices are the least educated. And that's kind of a sad thing, but that seems to be what happens. So you're going to get some bad reviews. Okay. Be ready for it, because it's coming. But you can kind of console yourself with the idea that these people probably have not written books before. They've probably never even finished writing a book or even attempted to write a book. They may be a great reader, but they're not necessarily a great writer. They don't understand what goes into it. Maybe they are a writer, but they've never published anything. Okay. That's what most of them do.
I get real testy about this. First of all, I don't read reviews. And I certainly don't read reviews by anyone who has not written a book or is not an editor. All right. In my opinion, they don't have a right to an opinion. They can write, they didn't like it. Okay. But when they try to, dissect it for other people, then I get angry. I don't listen to movie reviewers who have never starred in, written, produced a movie. Mm-hmm. There are people on the outside criticizing in a few minutes what someone who spent hundreds of hours creating. And I used to do book reviews. And then I pulled myself out of it. I came to my senses because I had not written a book. I just kind of fell under conviction about that. I thought, well, who am I? I've never even attempted this. Other than, a short book review, that's easy to write. But not, having not written the book. Now it's a little different. There are reviewers who do write. That's a whole different ballgame. So, you have Mark Twain being critical of, who was it? I think Aaron. Didn't Mark Twain, he didn't like Cooper?
Not sure. I know
okay.
Nathaniel Hawthorne was not a fan of Moby Dick's or of Herman Melville's.
Yeah, and he got a lot of critiques. He got the worst one. He says, Moby Dick sells in the United States for 25 cents a copy, and it's not worth a nickel. Man, that's brutal. Sometimes you get, so I don't read it. To me, it's just a negative influence. It's a ball and chain. And unless I respect the person doing the reviewing and know that they have credential, I just don't pay attention to it. We live in an age of trolls where one thing people love to do is be critical of someone else. I do typewriter videos, I do other videos, and every once in a while I'll get a thumbs down. And it's because some people cannot give a thumbs up. I've met people who have told me, when they ask you questions about a service, I never give 5 stars. I won't give anybody 5 stars. What happens if they deserve 5 stars? I don't know. I just can't give it to them. All right. So there are people like that. You don't pay attention to those. All right. You pay attention to the work. That's all that matters.
Yeah. And that's what it is. I would avoid those where you can. I've read some where it's very, very clear that they've not read the book very carefully. And so you can't control that. You're not assigning homework on it. You have no control over that. So people are going to be complaining that for whatever reason, it makes them feel powerful. It makes them feel as if they can criticize you, that means that they're better. They're not. If they were better than you, they would have books out. I mean, if Stephen King criticized my book, I would listen. If he gave me a bad review, then I would, probably read that review and see if there's some way to improve myself. But for the most part, it's not Stephen King who's writing negative reviews because he knows better. I don't know, maybe he does. I don't talk with him. Maybe he goes around trolling on the internet, but
ever?
I kind of doubt it.
You never have conversations with him? I thought you guys had coffee once a week.
Well, we did until that whole restraining order thing came up. So
right. Yeah. That's what you get for stepping on his cat.
Yeah, we can't hang out anymore. So, but there's that. Those are the times people are most usually tempted to quit. And Molly, you've got some notes here, though.
I did. I just went a little personal at the end of this. I very recently, because of the flu and being medicated, not just because of that, but it aggravated, I went through a bout of writing depression, and I seriously thought about quitting last week. In my notes, I said it wasn't for any of these reasons, but realistically, it was a culmination of several of them. Rather than wanting to quit writing during the writing process, I wanted to quit after the writing process. As y'all know, my manuscript is finished, at least the first draft. And my discouragement came about as part of the emotion because, as Al pointed out, we as creatives are very emotional people. And when I did have the flu, I also had a severe cold at the same time. I was medicated. And Aaron, you and Naomi have seen me when I'm on cold medication. It's not a pretty sight. So it never goes well for me. Combined that with a few rejections from agents and publishers and no response from others, I was really ready to say that nothing mattered and I was ready to quit. So I did what Aaron suggested, and I had a heart-to-heart talks with 3 of my best friends, and basically they Gib slapped me back into focus And now I have a better direction for how to edit and rewrite NOLA and a game plan and schedule for getting it done on my terms. And because Al is fond of explaining things for people who don't know, I did put this in here. For those who don't know, Gibbs is a character from the TV show NCIS, and he slaps his team on the back of the head when they need to refocus on the case at hand. It's really a sign of affection, and it always works.
It's a painful sign of...
It is, but it's authentic, and that's exactly what my friends did over the phone. Was they said, "Do not make me Gibbs slap you. You need to do this, and you need to not do that." And it worked. And I, above all else, what was really hysterical was I looked at the show notes last night. I was already going to blog about it, and then I saw that the title of this show was "Encouragement from Discouragement." It was kind of like the planets aligned, so it was hilarious. And I felt fingers pointing at me. So like, pay attention, Molly. So I wrote a blog post about that, and I put that in the show notes for the link.
Yeah. So when I put this up tomorrow, you guys will be able to find the link there and check that out. So that is our time. We're a couple minutes over. Molly, we had a very active chat room tonight. We had 10 people there. So
yeah.
Good to see people tuning in. Appreciate that. Any questions from the chat room?
Great conversation, people going back and forth and talking about everything, but no actual questions, except they were talking about kimchi, and I didn't know what that was.
Oh,
so
I do. I've had it once.
Tess says, Aaron, do I need to have a concussion to be a better writer?
A concussion?
That's what she says. That was, I don't know, about 10 minutes ago. So you were talking about football.
Oh, yes. So. Yes, concussions make you much better writers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They take away exactly that restraint, right? And that lack of filter. So
you got it. Yeah.
And they are talking about praying mantises and bugs. And Becky Lindsay had her book launched last week. Very proud of her in the chat room.
That's right.
She's published now. That's my girl. I'm so proud of her.
What day was that? What day was that on that she did her book launch?
I do not know. It was a week ago. It was last Thursday because I was unable to be a part of it, and I feel so bad, Becky. I'm so sorry, but it was a big success for her. I'm very proud of her. I'm
really glad, Becky. I had planned on attending as well. I was on a plane out to Madrid, so I was on a very long. My gosh, the flight out to Madrid was insane. I had a 3-hour layover in Dallas that turned into a 8-hour layover in Dallas.
Yay for Dallas.
And it wasn't.
Should have told me they got a great restaurant in the airport.
Well, here was the thing. It wasn't like, oh, your flight has been delayed 5 hours. Go get some dinner. It was, your flight has been delayed 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 on and on. So we couldn't leave because we were supposed to be boarding in 5 minutes.
Just as soon as we get this wing reattached, we'll be ready to go.
Oh my gosh. They started bringing out snacks. They brought out snacks. We're sorry for the inconvenience. We'll be boarding in about 5 minutes. Here's some snacks while you wait.
Oh my goodness.
Well, if you're bringing out snacks, we're not boarding in 5 minutes. You are lying to me. Anyhow, it was awful. So no other questions?
No other questions. Oh, except one. Dave wants to know if your underwear model came fully dressed to the date.
She did. It was a blind date. My buddy Matt set me up. He says, you want to go on a blind date? And I was like, bro, come on. No, I don't want to go on a blind date. He goes, she's an underwear model. I said, what time am I picking her up? So we went out, and I'll try and make this story very, very short, but it was a very comical evening, but she was the most shallow person I'd ever met in my entire life. I think my comment to her was, there's more to life than just fashion, like just clothes and money. And her response was, I know, I just don't care. I was like, all right, I think we're good.
Wow.
Check, please.
Okay.
Check, please. So, all right. Well, that's our time. We're a couple minutes over. We made it through. Hopefully it's coherent. Thanks for bearing with us. Thanks for
yes, thank you.
being so involved in the chat room. A couple of weeks from now, our next podcast will be mental missteps, avoiding common writer mental mistakes. So that should be a lot of fun. Again, that'll be in 2 weeks at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In the meantime, if you want to check out our websites and communicate with us, you can find Pops at altongansky.com. You can find Molly at frankly-my-dear-mojo.com. And you can find me at aarongansky.com. So we thank you all for listening. And until next week, good writing.